Ah, is this the final sprint before the end of Ango that we're experiencing? Everybody's like doing everything we can as fast as we can to make it as perfect as we can. And yet, what is perfection? I'm playing with this. Okay, there we go. Good. All right. So here we are on Friday. One more day, 2 more days of Sesshin left, actually, today and tomorrow. And everybody has been practicing hard, really hard, whatever that means. And I was very happy to see the photo of our Shuso cleaning toilets. That brought some levity and cheerfulness to our attitude here. And the Sento being so serious. And then to see that was fabulous. It's really great. That
I saw that yesterday when I was doing kinnin, and when I first saw it, I laughed so hard it hurt my chest.
right. It was like every time I passed it, it just kind of just brought brightness to me, to my being, and that was nice. So a couple days ago, I started with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, mindfulness of the body. And I gave you a lot, right, to focus in on different parts of the body. That was kind of an intellectual approach to being in the body, trying to get those neural pathways sparking again if they haven't been. And then I decided, I was going to read, and because I really love Trungpa Rinpoche. And in his book, The Path of Individual Liberation, he also has commentary on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which are really helpful, I think, in kind of having another approach to the Theravadan approach of Joseph Goldstein. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and invite you to ask questions, kind of think along with me, because I haven't totally integrated this, but this is how I'm doing it, is by actually reading a lot of his writing, because he's so, I just find it kind of refreshing. So he's from the Kagyu tradition, Vajrayana tradition. They have different lineages, Kagyu tradition. And they believe that deliberate focusing on mindfulness of the body is unnecessary. Although he is commenting on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. They think the Kagyu meditation tradition technique, and there's a big controversy, or there was in Tibet. It was said that Kagyupas meditate like pigs. They just sit and breathe. It's kind of Zen, very Zen, Zen traditional. And pigs are very smart, so there's nothing wrong with sitting like a pig. So Trungpa says, this intellectual approach to mind and body, mindfulness and body, where you're supposed to really explore every little thing, every muscle part of the body. while people can get a lot of reinforcement, and yeah, you can relax different parts of your body, and it is good to relax a very tense body, right? It is good to be relaxed. But he says it could become a self-existing preoccupation. Stuffy could become too solid and solemn. So that's why I really appreciated that picture of our shuso, because that kind of added some humor, a sense of joy to our practice, which really also, this is what our meditation practice is about. So Trungpa says we're watching the body, yeah, like, and how to do that is like breathing. And walking meditation also is a great way to ground in the body. And Joseph Goldstein, also talks about just feeling the earth under, or the floor under the soles of your feet, just feeling it, and that grounds you in the body, which is a great relief, right? From always being in our minds, a great relief. And using bodily sensations as reminders. You have a body, itches. Do you have to scratch it right away? Not really, right? Emotions that arise. Yeah, you can honor, you can watch them, but you don't have to dwell in your head about it. Just kind of feel your body. So he says that the idea of meditation is not to create states of ecstasy or absorption, but to experience being. In meditation, there's a quality of both being and rest. Being and rest. And it's meant to arouse your trust. Trust in what? What trust could that be?
Practice.
Trust in the practice, yeah. Well, let's not answer that question, just keep that in mind. So in mindfulness of body, Trungpa is saying you are simply trying to remain as an ordinary human being. When you sit, you actually sit. Even your floating thoughts begin to sit on their own bottoms. At that point, there is no problem. You have a base, solidness, and a sense of being all at the same time. And that quality of solidity seems to be the starting point of mindfulness of body. That state, quality of solidity, just sitting on your bottom. And if you don't have this quality of meditation, your meditation could become very airy, up there, which I used to do a lot of. Where was I? I have no idea. I wasn't even sitting on my butt. I was, but I didn't know what I was doing, really. So that being of that quality of solidity is really the starting point of mindfulness of the body. Right, he says, constantly tiptoeing on the surface of the universe, not actually getting a foothold anywhere, you become an eternal hitchhiker. That's what I was, an eternal hitchhiker. I am that sometimes now too. Okay, so the technique of the first foundation of mindfulness is based on the solidity and on finding home ground, your home ground. And you're just paying attention to what's happening in your body. Any sensations, sense perceptions, breathing, walking. Okay, so just being with your body fully and completely. You're not meditating on anything else. So he says, although occasionally you might experience that you are being there, that you are watching yourself being there, and that the watcher is watching itself, this is just a phase. It is another little project that wears out quickly and comes back into simply experiencing being. All right, so you're okay, I'm sitting, okay, everything's okay, I can feel my bottom. And then it's alternating into just being. Relating to your breath, okay? We know all that. So that's the practice. And there might be difficulties with that, too. He's reminding us also that whatever we do in our life, we are affected by the mind. Our true body is being pressured by the speed of the mind. Okay, so we've got that technique of shamatha meditation to help cut through the speed, focusing on the breath. So the second foundation of mindfulness, he calls mindfulness of life. And it's a simultaneous touch and go, touch and go. So in the second foundations, he's saying the meditative state is tangible, but at the same time, there's a letting go. You are there, and then you let yourself go. Touch and go always come together. So he's saying you've got to be fully mindful to touch, but it can't be maintained by itself without go. You need both, and both you need to be fully mindful. And that's true in human relationships. You have to have this attitude of touch and go. And that creates further relationship because there is so much space and at the same time so much interest. The problem is that if you have too much interest, this creates claustrophobia. And the relationships turn sour. And if there's too much space, the relationship becomes stagnant or sterile. So I think the right combination is fullness and emptiness, touch and go, which is a playful kind of thing. With touch and go, you do not have to secure your practice, but you could simply tune into it. It's a question of confidence. So in this second foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of life, you begin to appreciate the details of what goes on in your own body, speech, and mind. You're not yet venturing out in the world still. The study of the outside comes at a later stage of meditation. So this application of mindfulness has to be precise, this shamatha, this one-pointed attention, right? It has to be precise. However, if we cling to the practice, it becomes stagnant, like we're just tight on this focus. It becomes stagnant. It is often thought that the meditative state of mind has to be captured, then cherished and nursed. But that seems to be a misunderstanding. Really? The result of domesticating one's mind in that manner is regression on the path, being unable to maintain the freshness of the awareness. Shucks, just when I thought I was just really focused and I got that count down, you mean it is creating stagnation? What's going on here? In the samsaric world, things are done without mindfulness, and we thrive on that, right? Consequently, everything that we do, without exception, is somewhat disjointed. Things don't click, they don't fit. Although you might be a very reasonable, good person, everything you do is still somewhat off, somewhat illogical. The problem is that fundamental neurosis takes place all the time, which creates pain for others and pain for yourself. People get hurt as a consequence of bounding back and forth. In that neurotic world, nobody is actually having a good time. Even if you are having a good time, it is somewhat forced and being pushed into having a good time, which is a form of indulgence. In this second foundation, there is a love of mindfulness as opposed to mindlessness, which is connected with death. Mindlessness is connected with death. At this point, interestingly, the practice of meditation becomes the central focus of your life. It is more than just practice. It is part of the instinct of life. The life force, that which keeps us alive, is the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness brings clarity, skill, and intelligence. You are brought from the level of intense confusion to the psychosomatic body, and then to the real body. You are not tuning into life in order to live further, but rather to experience the survival taking place this very moment. You are here, you are living, let it be that way. Such mindfulness has strength. Your heart pulses, you breathe, everything is happening at this very moment all at once. Let mindfulness work with all of that. Let that be mindfulness. Let every beat of your heart and every breath be mindfulness. You don't have to breathe in a special way. As it is, breathing is an expression of mindfulness. Whenever we sit and meditate, our tendency is to have an attitude of the sternos. Where did we put it, Jules? Yes, okay, why don't you go get it? Okay. A little interruption there. All right, so let's go back to this because this is a good one. Whenever we sit and meditate, our tendency is to have an attitude of renunciation or austerity. Right? Austerity. We feel that we are being good and that we are getting away from the ugly world, that we are becoming pure. Trungpa calls this attitude to be a problem. It is devoid of life. With that approach, we remove the practice of meditation from our actual living situation. The basic approach of the mindfulness of life, oh, thank you, Julie. The basic approach of the mindfulness of life is that what goes on with our body and our state of consciousness is worthy of respect. There is a feeling of well-being. Mindfulness of life is rediscovering your world. You develop reverence and respect, an actual experience in your relationship to yourself and to the world. I'll repeat that again. The basic approach of mindfulness of life is that what goes on with your body and your state of consciousness is worthy of respect. There is a feeling of well-being. Mindfulness of life is rediscovering your world. You develop reverence and respect, an actual experience in your relationship to yourself and to the world. Well-being, in terms of the second foundation of mindfulness, is based on appreciating your own existence rather than being conditioned by this or that. Say that again. Well-being, in terms of the second foundation of mindfulness, is based on appreciating your own existence rather than being conditioned by this or that. And now he talks about irritation as an expression of well-being. So, in the second foundation of mindfulness, you are not getting into the world and beginning to dance with it. You are purely paying attention to what is happening. You also relate with irritation as an expression of well-being. with physical sensations such as an itch on your shoulder while you're meditating, the automatic reaction is to scratch and get it over with. But there's another approach. Instead of trying to get away from that particular itch, if you related with it, that itch could become an expression of well-being. In other words, if you feel irritated and tense, feeling that irritation and feeding that irritation and tenseness by doing something to get rid of it does not help at all. Instead, you could relate with that irritation as an expression of survival. No point in suppressing the sense of survival or security that comes up in the mind during meditation practice. No point in suppressing the sense of survival or security that comes up in the mind during meditation practice. The very fact that you are capable of experiencing irritation means that your psychological state is refined, sensitive, and intelligent. You can relate to these physical sensations and psychological tensions as expressions of well-being or survival. So in mindfulness practice, working with the breathing is based on a subtle level of effort. The concentration or focus on the breathing has to be maintained and kept alive. That subtle effort is also an expression of well-being, and it should be a light touch. Right, there's that analogy about the Buddha and the musician, who was asking him how tight should he tighten the strings on his instrument. And the Buddha said, that he shouldn't tighten it too much or loosen it too much. So it's necessary to develop effort that's not too tight or too loose. If you have no effort and you're completely spaced out, you do not have a chance to experience well-being. Nor do you have a chance to develop good meditation practice. At the same time, trying to achieve an ideal or perfect meditative state is also a problem. Perfectionism is a hang-up. In the second foundation of mindfulness, any awkwardness that occurs in the state of meditation practice is regarded as a further expression of well-being. Any awkwardness that occurs in the state of meditation practice is regarded as a further expression of well-being. Thank God. Okay, so you can't just, even the breathing, don't be too heavy-handed or you're gonna just kill the whole thing. Yeah, your practice can become very mechanical. So mindfulness of breathing, light touch there. And yet you have to have effort. He says out-breathing is a way of communicating to the sense perception. It's like extending your tentacles, focusing on the out-breath. In-breathing is allowing room or space to be. Again, if your approach is not too heavy-handed, there's no conflict between in-breathing and out-breathing. Light touch. So meditation is not regarded as a project. The breath is just there and you allow the awareness to be whatever it is going to be. If you are too serious, meditation becomes an imprisonment for you rather than an expression of freedom. Too much seriousness becomes an obstacle. If you are not working too hard, your meditation becomes less demanding. You can get into it after a few seconds, or you can practice without difficulties. Any irritations that arise can be used to regenerate our meditation. Any problems that come up will be self-liberated by practice as long as your approach is light and right there. Okay, how are we doing? That was the first two foundations of mindfulness, a la Trungpa Rinpoche. Shall we go on to the third? Okay. All right, so here's the third foundation of mindfulness. It's mindfulness of effort. And he calls the effort of the third foundation of mindfulness extraordinary. Effort is a question of discipline, patience, and exertion. Effort is often talked about in the pejorative sense in terms of going against the natural flow and trying to behave yourself. In that sense, it is a source of alienation. You are alienating yourself from reality, which brings a great deal of non-mindfulness. The question is whether there is a natural instinct that is right and appropriate. If so, there's no problem. However, it is not so simple to realize that natural instinct. We prefer the causal instinct of indulgence, viewing it as a good gift and going along with haphazardly. Ah, yes, indulgence. So he's got some flashes here. It's kind of fun. The first flash is duality. In the practice of mindfulness of effort, we are developing clear-seeing vision in order to be able to relate with the natural instinct of exertion and patience. This is a natural instinct, exertion and patience. By instinct, we mean the instinct of self-consciousness, almost an unconditional self-consciousness. This instinct is quite similar to the notion of survival in the second foundation of mindfulness. However, in this case, we go beyond survival to self-consciousness. When you relate to the world, one of the first flashes that takes place is a feeling of duality or separateness. From that first flash, you then begin to evaluate, to pick and choose, to involve yourself in decision-making. You begin executing desire and will. In the mindfulness of effort, you are not particularly trying to be good or absolutely perfect, but you are going back to the first flash. If the meditation practice presented to you has nothing to do with you, but is a way of transforming you into a better personality, you have already been alienated by the very idea of practice. Let me say that again. If the meditation practice presented to you has nothing to do with you, but is a way of transforming you into a better personality, you have already been alienated by the very idea of practice. You feel that you are not good enough, that you could be better if you practiced more. Yes, I need to practice more. In contrast, mindfulness of effort is not a way of reforming yourself. It is starting with what you are. It is being what you are with exertion and discipline. You don't have to start by trying to be the best, you just do it. So in mindfulness of effort, you start with the experience of duality. That duality is there already. You don't particularly have to make a study of it. What's there is a sense of duality or separateness. The instinct to practice arises because there is somebody to practice. Self-consciousness is the basis of practice. If you regard practice as a way to get away from the problem of duality, you are recreating that reference point and solidifying the problem. But if your attitude suggests a fresh, direct experience of duality, you can utilize it. This is such heady information, but so good, isn't it? It's a lot to take in. I'll repeat that again. If you regard practice as a way to get away from the problem of duality, you are recreating that reference point and solidifying the problem. But if your attitude suggests a fresh, direct experience of duality, you can utilize it. Instead of sabotaging your self-consciousness, you work with it so that everything is included. Having developed that somewhat unconditional reference point, it's possible to extend that and to utilize it in daily life. Through such awareness, it is possible to develop effort that is not based on a particular plan or aim, but on the simple, unconditional effort to be. So really working with duality here. Just being with it all. Then he talks about the game of resistance. Ah, yes, resistance. In the beginning, there can be an almost childish mentality, like not wanting to go to school regarding meditation practice. This problem can easily be broken down by being aware of the resistance. In doing so, you've already started. Beyond that, there are no further problems except for little practice hassles, such as irritating thoughts and bodily discomfort. Some resistance is ongoing, otherwise there wouldn't be any journey. By relating to the resistor and the resistance, you've begun the journey. As the idea of practice occurs in your mind, that much resistance occurs in your mind at the same time. If you make a big deal of the resistance or try to eliminate it altogether, that makes the resistance greater. Looking for smooth practice, for practice with no resistance, only increases the resistance. Really? The breath and resistance are similar in that the breath is an alternating experience that comes and goes. The impulse to resist comes in spells. In following the breath, sometimes the breathing acts as a way of distracting your attention from mindfulness or awareness. Sometimes the breathing becomes a help. That's why any one technique is not regarded as 100% good. Any technique we introduce could take you away from the integrity of the practice, although at the same time it could help. That is part of the game of resistance. Having awareness of resistance is mindfulness. Well, let's see here. I mean, there's so much here. I haven't even gotten to the mindfulness of mind. He just talks about, effort more. And let's see, there was one that was, he calls us professionals. What does he call it? How we need a discipline because we're such professional samsara people. We're professional at being in samsara. We need effort. We need all of these disciplines, and yet we have to be careful that we don't become like too rigid. Effort is like the wheel of a chariot, which connects the chariot and the road. It's like the oar in a boat, which connects the boat to the water. Effort is the connection that makes things move forward and proceed. So mindfulness of effort, the sudden reminder or sudden jerk of mindfulness, is extremely important for the practice of meditation. The sudden jerk of effort is not about improving your meditation, but about bringing it back to the ground, sitting on a cushion or chair and breathing. With that sudden jerk, you are meditating properly. Without it, you could be sitting for 5 hours a day and find that you had actually gotten back to your breathing practice only 15 minutes during the whole period. Instead, you were reading your own autobiography and doing all kinds of other things. Rerunning things, going over things. Okay, and he also talks about this notion of patience, right? To be patient. Patience doesn't mean putting up with problems or bearing pains. It is the effort to maintain non-aggression. That is the definition of patience, maintaining non-aggression. Aggressiveness brings up the attempt to develop productivity through sitting practice. There are some of us karma people, we got to be productive. I know. Right, it brings evaluation, the attempt to gain somewhat that will act as an encouragement, landmark, or achievement. As it has been said in the sutras or commentaries on the Buddhist teaching, being hardworking is based on developing the prajna of virya. It is based on developing appreciation or joy in the practice. That's really important. Appreciation or joy in the practice. Wow, okay, so I have to stop there. So maybe we can have a little discussion or questions about these first three foundations of mindfulness, the way that Trungpa Rinpoche sees them. And really, this book is really worth reading. The Path of Individual Liberation. He's just got some chapters in here on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And I just love the way he, he sees the practice. Liz, how about a microphone for Liz? Yeah, would you? There's a microphone right there, Liz. And I can still do this here. Yeah.
I really appreciated the part about resistance, because come Monday morning, mine goes over. Mine goes over on Sunday. So my resistance to my practice, making sure I come back, continuing, figuring out why I'm resisting it. So I really appreciated that. I really did.
Yeah, so that is not, we're not meditating only on the cushion here, but really meditation has come into our daily lives, really. And this has been such a good foundational practice for us to establish some new ways of being in our life with awareness, flashes of awareness, and then we'll, let go, and then it's like, oh, here I am in my body. So in the beginning, it definitely takes effort. You got to push yourself, right? And then you start practicing, and then you notice what you're doing, and being too rigid, too lax. It's really an ongoing effort here.
So you mentioned that irritation is a sign of wellness, right? Okay. That's really interesting, because I know when I started meditating, I started noticing a lot of like irritation that was probably there all along. And I think like bearing witness to it is like the first step into actually being well, because you sort of discover what you're working with. So that was like really reassuring to like hear that, because it sort of confirms like, well, it makes me, it takes the pressure off, as like, I'm irritated right now, like I shouldn't be irritated, as opposed to like, it's good, like it's something, it's telling me something that I should work on, work with. So appreciate that.
There was a lot. So in my short attention span, I probably went somewhere else. But one of the things that kept me going was the image of making little projects. You mentioned that, and that can get in the way of mindfulness, and that kind of carried me through your whole talk. Oh, that's a little project too, to fix that. So I found that was really, really helpful to have just that image. And also that idea of impatience being a way to be aggressive. I'm sitting with that and kind of growing into that idea. I really like that. So thank you. And also thank you for all the people here with using the microphone, being there until just now. It was so wonderful to be felt included. So thank you. So I know, and I felt thank you. I know, but thank you. So there you go.
Roshi.
So that was a lot. I love Trungpa. He was a really important teacher in my life, and he was brilliant. But I can't tell you how many times I have read this teaching of his on the 4 foundations of mindfulness and come away just dumbfounded and puzzled. So when he talks about unconditional reference points, I don't know what he's talking about. It goes beyond I just don't understand half of what he's saying here. And it's all right that I don't understand it. And there's contradictions. If irritation is well-being, then why is patience non-aggression? Isn't irritation a kind of aggression too? So I can follow him through the first two. And I think he's brilliant on so many levels. And then when he gets to the third one, I get the sense of the flash when you no longer have a technique like shamatha and you're not counting the breath and you're moving into vipassana. Then there's a kind of, I get that sense that you kind of have a flash and you come back, but you don't do it with any technique. You just have kind of internal, it's just, you're doing it. So, and I think I understand that, but then he kind of loses me in the third and the fourth foundation, and I have to admit I just don't. It's too advanced for me. I don't understand it, and it just confuses me a bit. But and that doesn't mean that it's not valid. I just don't. I just can't follow some of the stuff that he's saying once he gets into the third and fourth. And you didn't even get to the fourth foundation.
I didn't even finish the third. So
Yeah, it gets kind of heady and abstract in so many ways, and I have to really try to lean in and hear what he's saying. And I have to admit that I don't really get some of it. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't hang together even. And most of his teachings do for me, but this one is really challenging for me.
yeah, mindfulness of effort is the third foundation here. So he's really talking about effort, and that includes, what's ordinary. That includes.
Yeah. So may I say something?
Yeah. So anyway.
I'm probably just dense and don't get it, but mindfulness of effort, in the way it's taught in the Theravada tradition, mindfulness of mind is really going beyond the effort of willpower, the effort that we are doing a practice. So it sort of contradicts the Theravada approach, and yet the way I get that when I really listen to what he's saying about effort, he's not saying a willfulness, but it's very subtle, and I can't, to me, the third foundation is a really getting out of the way, and maybe he's saying that, but I don't. It's hard for me to get it.
Well, I haven't totally integrated this yet. Yes, Barb, but it's certainly something worth studying because I think it's, anyway. Yes, Barb.
Thank you again for putting this together. And I'm no expert, and I hope I never am. And I have so much relief when I read his words about effort. Such deep, somehow it does get through to my heart, because it's no kind of effort I've ever, maybe lifetimes experienced. It's no effort that still takes intention and intention to be aware, and somehow it gives me such a soft place to land, that I do begin to develop that trust that you asked us the question about in the beginning. And I started playing with I'll just have to keep seeing what comes from this, but the relationship between the capacity or the gift or grace of trust and the capacity or gift of confidence, and how they work together or don't. I'm not sure, no expert. Yeah, and I'm really glad that your short attention span picked up something that I completely didn't, which was the stuff about impatience. So thank you for that. And I think too, I just have such an appreciation for Trungpa, for his ability to touch as like so many experiences that people have had and expressing them. And I adore that book. I'll just open it, and just read a paragraph or two and close it sometimes. And I have to say, I don't remember a lot of this. And so thank you for putting your heart with it as well so that I can hear it differently. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jackie.
Good morning, Sensei. Everyone, I very clearly know that for the first almost a year after coming to the Zen Center, I was going to the cushion just trying to purposefully sit still, my body. And that took a while for me, just sitting still. And I just in this sesshin was able to go through one 30-minute segment before bells without looking at the clock. And that's into the year 3. Yay. But my point is, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because for 50 some odd years, I couldn't do either. So that's really great progress. But in terms of not holding myself to some kind of a standard, which is the grace of this practice for me, is to be free of myself. I got a little confused, and I didn't want to really think I was doing it wrong, but I got a little confused about this idea of the effort to be and then just be. Because I have felt such a, well, I don't want to say desire. I have felt this idea of spontaneity of Buddha nature, the spontaneity of my Buddha nature is very lovely to me. And I do get caught up in the intellectualizing of, actionable words like effort and pay attention to. And I get really caught up in those kind of things. And then I start wondering if I'm doing it right or wrong. So that effort to be followed, I think there was like 2 words in between. And then he said, just be. And I was like, no, you don't get to do that to me because it confuses me. But anyway, that's enough for my, oh, go ahead.
I've read a lot of Trungpa Rinpoche, and he is way beyond me. But I do read also a lot of Pema Chodron, and I think she's like Trungpa Rinpoche for beginners. And where it might take me a few weeks to get through one of his books, it'll take me a few days. And I think she just breaks it down and makes it much simpler for somebody like me.
Pema Chodron. Pema Chodron. All right.
And
so,
can I say something?
yeah, sure.
It's actually wonderful. I'm so happy that you did this. And there's so much to chew on here, but this idea of starting with duality at the 3rd foundation of mindfulness is just the opposite of the Theravada approach, and it's very Vajrayana. It's a Vajrayana teaching for sure, and I think that's why it's so difficult to take in. Really, it's very subtle, and it's just subtle. It's subtle beyond subtle, and it's even in Mahayana, there's much more emphasis on non-duality and going beyond it. And I think in Vajrayana, what he's saying is that if we're too heavy-handed about going beyond non-duality, we're just creating another reference point. It's dualistic. But I also think that it's possible to drop the dualistic reference points. Otherwise, I don't know. But I'm anyway, so happy, Sensei, that you gave this talk today, and thank you. we could talk about this for we could have a wonderful discussion if we had more time to really dig into this. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking this is a perfect book for another study group. You know, there's just so much
Yeah.
in here. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, we're going to be eating lunch now. Tanya's wonderful cooking. And yeah, that's why Anne came to be in person to taste her yummy cooking. So anyway, yeah, so just so happy that everyone's practicing, and by now we're, you know, really into it. And so have a wonderful couple more days of this intensive practice. I can't believe it's almost over. So thank you for your practice.
Thank you, Sensei.
You're welcome.
Thank you.